considered to be the greatest revolution in history. A revolution that let loose the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. A revolution that transferred the powers from monarch to the body of citizens. A revolution that changed the course of politics, not just that of Europe, but of the whole world. A revolution that led to the public execution of King Louis XVI. But why did that happen in the first place? There's no one particular reason as to why did it happen. However, there are many causes. We're going to discuss some of them in detail, which include the despotic nature of the French monarchy, the social cause, and the condition of the common people. Let's discuss the first one. Despotic or despotism means that all the powers rest with the monarch, which means that there is no separate legislature, no separate executive, or even no independent judiciary at all. France at that time was ruled by the Bourbon monarchs. The Bourbons were the complete despots and believed in the divine right theory of kingship. The Bourbons considered themselves to be the representatives of God on earth and not answerable to anyone except God. The story begins from 1774 when King Louis XVI ascended the throne, and he was only 20 years of age back then when he became the monarch of the France. Whereupon he married the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette, and he would dance around the tune of his wife just like his fathers did. Upon his ascension to the throne, King Louis XVI found the treasure to be empty completely. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France completely. Added to this was the maintenance of the royal court of Versailles. Furthermore, under the kingship of King Louis XVI, France helped 13 colonies of America to gain independence from the common enemy, British, and the war nearly added a billion more livres to the debt that had already been risen to 2 billion livres. The French society was divided into three estates back then in the old regime: the clergy, nobility, and the third estate. The clergy and the nobility constituted around 5% of France's population. But here is the game. They owned more than 90% of the country's wealth. The third estate constituted around 95% of country's population, including mainly the peasants, artisans, and the businessmen. The burden of paying taxes laid upon the third estate and had to pay a number of taxes, including on the basic commodities such as tobacco and salt, known as the gabelle, and had to pay other taxes such as the tithes to the church, which meant 1/10 of their agricultural produce, and another tax called tele, which they had to pay to the state. While on the other hand, the clergies and the nobles were exempt from completely any kind of taxation. The population of France rose from 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789, which led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains. But the production of food grains could not keep pace with the growing demand, and this led to a situation called subsistence crisis, a situation in which the basic means of livelihood are endangered. So basically, all these three reasons led to the outbreak of revolution in France. However, the revolutionaries and the French philosophers played a key role in the outbreak of revolution. One of these philosophers was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His famous writing, called The Social Contract, published in 1762, was considered to be the Bible of French Revolution. In his writing, he suggested that a government should be based on a social contract between people and their representatives. Another famous philosopher, John Locke, published another writing called The Two Treatises of the Government, which sought to refute the doctrine of divine and the absolute right of monarch. Another giant philosopher was Montesquieu. His great work, The Spirit of Laws, had an immediate and immense success, in which he proposed a division of labor within the government, between legislature, executive, and judiciary. This model was put into force in the USA after 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. Their ideas were discussed in the public places, such as the saloons and the coffee houses. On the other hand, The economy of France was crumbling, as we discussed in our previous video, so King Louis XVI decided to increase the taxes. But this could not be done according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of representatives of all the three estates, known as the Estates General, and King Louis XVI called the meeting on 5 May 1789. Last time it was done in 1614. The first and the second estate sent 300 representatives each, while the 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. Voting in the Estates General in the past had been conducted according to the principle each state had one vote, so the third estate was outruled automatically. But this time the members of the third estate demanded voting now be conducted according to the principle of each member would have one vote. But this proposal was of course rejected. And this basically was the triggering factor and led to the outbreak of revolution. On 28 June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles and declared themselves to be a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution of France. They were led by two leaders, Mirabeau and Abésius. While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting the constitution, France was in turmoil. A severe winter led to a bad harvest. Prices of bread rose and the bakers started hoarding the supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, a crowd of angry women stormed into the shops, and on 14th of July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. Faced with agitation, King Louis XVI finally accorded and accepted the National Assembly of the Third Estate. From now on, the powers of monarch would be checked and limited, and on the night of 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed another law abolishing the system of taxes. Taxes such as tithes were abolished, and the land owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion. The National Assembly completed the draft in 1791. Its main aim was to limit the powers of monarch. Powers were now separated and assigned to different institutions, the legislature, executive, and judiciary. Hence, France became a constitutional monarchy. Citizens were now divided into two groups, the active and the passive citizens, and only the active citizens were allowed to vote. The active citizens had a population of nearly 4 million. For being an active citizen, a person must meet the following criteria. Number 1. A citizen must be a man above the age of 25 years. Number 2. He must be a taxpayer who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage. Rest of the citizens were declared as passive citizens, which were not entitled to vote, mainly women. The active citizens would vote and elect about 50,000 men, known as the electors. These men in turn would elect 745 members of Legislative Assembly who would make laws. However, the execution of these laws laid in the hands of monarch, and the judiciary would have a check on both of these, and henceforth France became a constitutional monarchy. As France became a constitutional monarchy, situation continued to be tense during the following years. Although King Louis XVI signed the constitution, he entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia and Austria. Rulers of the neighboring countries were worried by the developments in France, so they decided to send troops in order to deal with the French Revolution. But before this could happen, the National Assembly that was formed voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of locals formed People's Militia and declared war against all the aristocracies in Europe. They sang the patriotic song Marseillaise, which ultimately became the national anthem of France. But these wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the people, leading to the shortage of essential supplies. The constitution completed in 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of the society, so the passive citizens began forming political clubs. Most famous among them was that of Jacobins, with Maximilien Robespierre as their leader. It included small shopkeepers, artisans, and shoemakers. To identify themselves, the Jacobins used to wear long striped trousers as it was a symbol of being a less prosperous member of society. They began to be known as sans culottes, meaning those without knee breeches, as the knee breeches were worn by the fashionable members of society. In addition to this, they wore a red cap that symbolized liberty. In the summer of 1792, Jacobins, angered by the short supplies and high prices of food, stormed the Palace of Tuileries in August 10 and massacred King's guards and held King Louis XVI as a hostage. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family of King Louis XVI. Elections were now held. From now on, all the men of 21 years and above, regardless of their wealth, got the right to vote. The new assembly was called the Convention. And on September 21, 1792, the assembly abolished monarchy and declared France as a republic, with Maximilien Robespierre as its president. A republic is a form of government where people elect the government, including the head of the government. Later on, the assembly went further to announce death sentence for King Louis XVI, as he betrayed his own people through the agreement with Prussia and Austria. Later on, in January 21, 1793, he was publicly executed and his wife Marie Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. And after that, the reign of terror began to start. After Maximilien Robespierre was executed, the National Assembly was renamed as the Directory. Now the Directory had two legislative councils instead of one, and execution laid in the hands of 5 people instead of a single person. This was to prevent the accumulation of power in the hands of a single person, as in case of Maximilien Robespierre. During their time, the Royalists emerged as a group to bring back the Bourbon dynasty, and they put up a revolt, and this revolt was crushed by a certain Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was in the French army and was getting promoted due to his success in revolutionary wars. In the year 1799, he staged a military coup against the Directory and became the dictator. In 1804, he became the Emperor of France. The rest of Europe made coalition 6 times to defeat him, and only the 6th time did they succeed in the Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of Nations. In the year 1815, during the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium, he was captured and sent to a lonely island of St. Helena, where he finally died due to ulcer. Hope you guys enjoyed the series. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you really like our content.